Another huge day here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody stopping by for more in discussion, debate, and analysis of the game we all love. Keep in mind that we are not only here on the main channel, but we have all sorts of team channels with great discussions throughout the week. Meaning later today, we've got our Hawkeyes live show with Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. That's at 5:30 Eastern, Iowa Live. Got Nebraska Live with Greg Peterson from Husker Online every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central over on the Nebraska channel. So not everything is right here on the main channel. And with a lot of discussion, of course, concerning media rights, concerning conference realignment, and all the possibilities, all the rumors, all the facts and information, all the misinformation, and all the myths out there. We've had a ton of discussions in recent days. Tony Altimore, of course, and Tide Guy joined us just a few days ago for a stream right here on the main channel that you can look out for. Check out that live stream with Tony and with Tide Guy. It's extremely informative about what the probabilities and possibilities are concerning the Big 12, the Pac-12, and we took on the Florida State angle as well, which, of course, we will do on our Florida State show as well, coming up Wednesday at 6 Eastern. Also, great discussion with our buddy Matt Zemek on Trojans Wire on the USC show last night. That's every Monday at 11 p.m. Eastern time, our USC show with Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire. All right. We've got P. Childman, who is requesting a Zach Smith and Steve Dace show here. If I could ever get those two together. I totally get it. That would be fun. That would be entertaining. That would be intriguing for a lot of different reasons. I think we all believe. Do know that the Ohio State-Michigan debate was waged by Steve and myself a few weeks ago, so check out that edition of The One. It's our one-topic college football show that we produce each and every week with Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast, which reminds me that in just about an hour and a half, I'll be recording with Steve and whatever Michigan topic he serves up for me this week. So we record that every Tuesday afternoon, and then I think it's released just a few hours later, Steve and myself on Michigan Podcast over on the Michigan Podcast channel. Please check out if you have any concern or any thoughts or suggestions or recommendations, requests concerning the channel here at the Voice of College Football, that you check out our live stream from last night where we delivered our state of the Voice of College Football. That was a fun time. There were actually a number of topics, believe it or not, even though we went on for 2.5 or 3 hours. There were a few major topics that I missed and did not address. But we will not be holding a second State of the State address. We will go on from there. But one thing I did not address are sponsorships. So if you, in fact, have a business that could benefit from sponsoring here at the Voice of College Football, I am more than happy to let you know exactly what type of reach, influence, and metrics we have here and would be able to benefit you in a sponsorship right here. So if you would like to partner with the Voice of College Football, contact me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. All right. In the meantime, while we wait for Zach, I will take your comments and questions here in the chat. And hopefully Zach is able to wrap up. He basically wraps up his show every day at 1. And then they have to do some post-prod after that. To the live chat, and I know that one thing that I'm going to hit Zach on is the Big Ten schedule. So the Big Ten schedule format, there are all sorts of recommendations and suggestions out there. I always, anytime that I produce something where I have some type of recommendation or proposal, truth be known, trust me, I deliver it before I see what anybody else does. I'm not ever regurgitating, copying from anyone. So that said, we released a Big Ten schedule format Oh my goodness. We did one recently, but we also did one right after USC and UCLA were announced to the Big Ten. So it was out there immediately, my recommendations on a scheduling format for the Big Ten. I have since seen, and I apologize to these particular writers. I don't remember who. They weren't necessarily writers I had ever heard of, but I saw one posted on CBS Sports. Oh, I don't remember the other platforms. Maybe The Athletic, where I saw another one, maybe on 3 various scheduling proposals for the Big Ten. Everyone seems to be locked in on the guarantee that the Big Ten is going to go to a 3-6-6 model, meaning abolish the divisions, schedule 3 permanent opponents, and then split the rest of the conference into 2 quadrants of 6, and then have each team play those 6 teams in alternating groups each year. So, for example, if you're Michigan, you got to play Michigan State every year. You got to play Ohio State every year. Who is that third team that we would put together with Michigan? Well, it's not as easy as just making a schedule for one team. You got to take all 16 teams into consideration. You also have to adjust the schedule for, first and foremost, let's protect rivalries. So what are the rivalries? Well, they're pretty easy to see in the Big Ten. And in my opinion, not every game that is attached to a trophy, because there's 37 of them. I'm joking. 37 of those in the Big Ten, whatever the number is, 12, 11, 9. There's too many trophy games in the Big Ten. Not that I'm looking to take away trophy games, but that should not be a driving factor in a scheduling format in the new Big Ten of 2024. Look at this. We got Zach Smith on the line from Menace to Sports. Zach, what's going on today?
What's going on, Mark?
Appreciate you being here, man.
Absolutely, man. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I appreciate you having me on.
That. No, you got a lot going on after the show. How'd the show go today?
It went well. It took a little long to get out there. I had a YouTube issue, but those are sometimes common.
Yes. Yes. Life on YouTube. All right. Zach, appreciate you being here. Let's dive into it. And certainly if there's anything you want to take off on, go right ahead. But I was going to hit you up on spring practice is basically starting for everyone in the next couple weeks. As you look across the Big Ten and the nation, is there anything you're going to get out of the next 6 to 8 weeks that is going to tell you anything more than what you know now?
I mean, not on the public side of it, I don't think. I mean, if you can dive into some connections and find out what really happens, then yeah, you can learn a lot. But nowadays, you look at Ohio State, for example, they have a major quarterback battle, huge, going to be a huge story. There's no way that publicly anything is decided in spring ball just because they need both kids to come to training camp. And with the transfer portal opening up at the end of April, if they made that decision public, you definitely see some traffic into the transfer portal. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how those quarterbacks at Ohio State perform. I know Wisconsin has a slew of quarterback transfers coming in, kind of who emerges there. You might get a clearer picture there on who the 2 or maybe 3 guys are that are battling for that job, but it's a wide open race. But the one that I'm most excited about is Jeff Sims at Nebraska. I just think there's a potential for a massive kind of unveiling of one of the better players in college football, because I think he's very undervalued at what he did at Georgia Tech going back to his freshman year. I mean, he wasn't as consistent a thrower as you want, but he is a dynamic athlete. And I think he's a much better thrower than people believe. I know I talked to a coach that was at Georgia Tech last year, and they were like, I'm telling you, this kid is special. Watch out for him. So I think there's a lot of storylines in the Big Ten that are going to be fun to watch, at least begin to unveil. And I think, the reality is this: out of spring ball, Ohio State's going to know 90% who their guy is. Now, we just probably won't be told, but they're going to know. They're going to find out.
It's great that you bring up this Jeff Sims angle, because I don't know that a lot of people are talking about that because they assume that Casey Thompson's the starter. But obviously, he brings a dimension that Casey Thompson doesn't. So if you can bring up that passing ability anywhere close to Thompson, then depending on how you want to run your offense and how you want to approach it, then that could be a deciding factor. And, I kind of like it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the first names that pops into my mind when I think Jeff Sims and maybe what the ceiling could be as a thrower is what we've seen out of Jordan Travis for the last 2 to 3 years, where I said a couple of years ago, I said, this guy's a dynamic playmaker, but he's not an ACC starting caliber quarterback by any stretch. He doesn't know where the ball's going half the time. And then he got better significantly the next year where he was capable. And then the next year he takes another huge leap. And maybe Jeff Sims is capable of doing something like that.
I think he is. I really think he is. And I really like him on film, but just talking to coaches that were in the program with him has kind of elevated his stock to me. I feel like he's an untapped resource. And I really have faith in Matt Rule and his coaching staff that he compiled that they're going to level that kid up when it comes to just playing quarterback outside of just being a great athlete. He kind of reminds me of Malik Cunningham a little bit from Louisville, where just a really dynamic athlete, not a great thrower, but can throw it. And I think that Matt Rule's the perfect coach and his staff to really polish him up as a true quarterback, because he's always going to be a freaky athlete. He's always going to be able to run. He's always going to have those traits. It's just, can they make him a consistent, accurate quarterback? That's going to be the big question mark.
Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. So have you seen enough? Of course, we've seen McCord, spring games, and so forth. Have you seen enough of Devin Brown to really differentiate what these guys bring to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think Devin's a little bit better athlete. He's got a little more swagger to him when he plays. Kyle's more of a, drop back kind of it reminds me more of Dwayne Haskins, which is a great comparison. I mean, that's no one would be mad about being compared to a first round draft pick, but they're a little different stylistically. I don't think Kyle's as good of an athlete, though. I think he's not given credit for he's viewed as this statue stiff white guy who can't move at all. I think he's an okay athlete. He'll be able to scramble a little bit and extend some plays. And I think he has a bigger arm. I mean, I think he has one of those prototypical Josh Allen type of arms, like big arm, can make every throw all over the field. And Devin has a good arm, but I think he brings more moxie to the position. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where their strengths and weaknesses kind of meet and who's considered the more valuable player.
It brings to mind a conversation we had on our Iowa show last week, because I find this extremely interesting, where they currently have the 6 most NFL players on NFL rosters. They are certainly not the 6th best program in the country.
Right.
So I give them credit for taking, and most of those guys were not 5 stars or high 4 stars that they turned into NFL players. So on one hand, I give them a credit for developing guys that were under the radar to become NFL players, and not just guys that are sitting on rosters, guys that are contributing and sometimes stars. But on the other hand, why aren't they better on the field?
I mean, it's tough because Iowa year in, year out has one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. And I really think this whole Brian Ferentz drama, it's comical at this point. I mean, it's the fact that he took a pay cut, but if they score X amount of points a game, he's going to actually get a pay raise from last year. It's just that they've been so inept on offense, and we can blame Spencer Petras. We can blame, their lack of offensive skill. I mean, they are truly archaically running offensive football. They're not giving themselves any chance for success. And I think Brian Ferentz is the problem. I think everyone knows that. I think his own dad knows that. Shit, he might even know that. But how do you fire your kid?
Well, first off, you don't put your both of you in that situation.
Absolutely.
If I have that kind of pull and weight in college football, I liken it to Mark Richt at Miami a few years ago. He brought in his son to be the quarterback's coach. He wasn't qualified. Then he puts himself in a bad spot. Yeah. When you're Mark Richt or Kirk Ferentz, you can call any school in the country and say, give my boy a job.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. You're setting him up in a good place, but don't put yourself in that position. But
ultimately, like in the scope of college football, it was an extreme mismanagement by a father, right? I mean, he literally sent him to Belichick for 2 years and brought him back, and he's been with him ever since. And I mean, as a father, I get it. It's like, well, I don't really care what anyone thinks. I want my kid here. I want my grandkids here. I don't really care. Fire me then. I mean, I get it on a personal level, but when it comes to the business of college football, this is just a really bad look. Really bad.
Yeah, it's one thing when you own the family business and you can say, you know what, we're going to go down swinging because, that's what it is. But when you're accountable to millions of people that follow your team and 80,000 people that pack the stadium, and you make more money than anybody in the state, you're accountable to all those folks.
Supposed to be. Supposed to be.
And like you say, when you set up a contract that basically says, it's always my thought, you get a bonus for doing exceptional work or at least good work. but to say you can basically run the 90th best offense, and that's going to be a leap for them.
Yeah.
The 90th best offense, because that's what that kind of equates to, that 25 points per game. You can do that, and we're going to give you a bonus for that. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it was the biggest slap in the face I've seen in college athletics, maybe ever. Like, the guy should have been fired. Okay, you give him, you cut his pay and give him kind of a. I liked the hard line. I thought it was far too low, but kind of it's that out for Kirk Ferentz, right? Where if he doesn't achieve it, it's in his contract. I don't have to fire him. The contract fires him for me. So he can't be mad at me. He can't hold a grudge at Thanksgiving or Christmas morning. Like, he has to achieve this or he's out. But to tack on a massive bonus to get him back above his pay threshold, if he achieves that bare minimum, bottom of the barrel points per game number, it's just, if I was an Iowa fan, I would be livid.
Absolutely. It's completely ludicrous. And we're going to tack the 7-win minimum on it. Well, they've reached that 11 years in a row with a crappy offense.
With like 15 points or 10 points less a game. So yeah, if he achieves the points per game, they're going to win 7, right? They probably will without it.
And basically what you're telling your fan base as well is, okay, we play Iowa State and we play 2 non-cons that are gimmies. So basically we beat Iowa State 80 or 90% of the time. Basically, if we go 4-5 in the Big Ten, then we're calling that success.
Right. We're giving bonuses.
It is incredible. Unbelievable stuff right there. I've charted this number for about 5 years now because it hit me about 5 years ago in looking at publications like Street and Smith's Athlons. They do great work, but they're extremely conservative in their predictions. Pretty much they just say what you were last year, we might tweak it by a game. And I just noticed this and I started to think, well, it does seem like if you're a certain level of college football program, you kind of stay there.
Yeah.
But then I started looking at this for about 5 years, and basically it's the elites that stay there. Everybody else is in flux.
Yeah.
Zach, out of 65 Power 5 teams between 2021 and 22, and I made 3 games as a significant increase or decrease. So if you're a 9-3 team one year and you go to 6-6, I consider that a significant drop off.
Yeah.
Can you guess how many teams either increased or decreased their win totals by at least 3 between 21 and 22?
Oh my gosh. I bet it's a lot.
Anytime I ask people this question, they always guess like 8. It's 27. 27, almost half the Power 5 had a significant jump or drop. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I mean, the thing about a school like Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama is they're so loaded. Their roster's so loaded that they just replace guys. And you might have a little dip here or there. Alabama might not make the playoff one year, but they're going to maintain that level of success because they recruit so well, where you get a team like a Cincinnati or a Michigan State. I mean, Michigan State is one of those, right? They had such a great year because they found lightning in a bottle with Kenneth Walker III and some of the transfers. And it's like, they're not going to sustain that. They're Michigan State. They're not loaded. Their roster's not loaded top to bottom, where when Kenneth Walker leaves, that next running back is going to be like Kenneth Walker. And the big position's quarterback. You get a Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati. Like, what's going to happen when that kid leaves? He was so good. He was undervalued in recruiting. Like, probably should have been somewhere bigger. Are you going to have another Desmond Ridder behind him? The odds are probably not. And that's why a lot of these teams, Northwestern's a great example. Every 3 years, they're really good, because they're a really veteran-laden team, a bunch of older players that just do everything right. They make a run at maybe getting to Indy, win 8 games, maybe 9, and then the next year, all those kids leave and they go 1-10 or 2-10, because they don't have that roster built up to just year in, year out have that same level of success. And when teams do, that's when all of a sudden you see them really level up in college football.
You bring up Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald seems untouchable. If there would be a guy that I would think, okay, based on the expectations at the school and that he's a favored son, I get it. And I think the world of him. I think he's done a great job. But I know you're throwing out that 3-year cycle, but they've been better in the past, and those dips haven't been as low, and they've bounced back, and they got to a point where he built them up to be pretty much a bowl team almost every year. And now they're riding low, and this doesn't look like a bounce back year.
No.
Like,
I mean,
at
it's
what point do you say, okay, you need to turn this thing around?
yeah, it's one of those things where I think Northwestern's hit their ceiling, and I think the game is evolving. College football is evolving. You have transfer portals, NIL, all this stuff that is making it even harder for Northwestern to succeed. And there's just certain things that they're never going to bend the knee to, and that is academic standards. And I just don't know if you can win there. And so it comes a point where you say, all right, do we have realistic expectations, or are we just going to be that bad? Because that's just kind of the stipulations we have in our athletic department, that we can't go get some of these great players. And I don't know that it's ever time to move on from Pat Fitzgerald, because he's done such a great job there with such limitations. Because who are you getting next? Like, is he going to be able to do better than Pat Fitzgerald is doing?
Zach Smith's here talking college football, Menace to Sports. He's on YouTube every day from 12 to 2, so check him out there. And you can catch his audio podcast anywhere where you can pretty much download it. Did I get all that straight, Zach?
You got it all straight.
Okay. All right. You were talking about this today, and we've addressed this a lot here in regards to the Big Ten schedule format. Okay. So I think it's a good thing in regards to a format that they're going to go this route. This seems to be the way. The ACC's already gone this way. It just seems the way that, okay, these leagues are too big. We can't have divisions. We know what all the issues are with divisions. So we're going to go with this 3-6-6 model. So we want to protect rivalries, which makes sense. We can go into how far do those rivalries go, because in the Big Ten, just about everybody makes up a rivalry and puts a trophy on it. So I don't think all of them need to be protected. Shoot, they got away from Ohio State, Illinois in the last scheduling format, and Minnesota, Michigan. They're supposed to be rivals. So everything's not so sacred. And then I'm more about fairness and equity to determine the real champion, not try to load up on one program or make it. And I know that they're looking for broadcasting, the media, the exposure to the league, and making money means more than anything. So I didn't hear a ton, but I heard some of your comments today. So we don't know what the format is now, but there's a lot of conjecture out there and projections on what it would be. And we're seeing Michigan and Penn State for Ohio State, and fill in the blank for the third team, and it could be rather rough for the Buckeyes.
There's no doubt. I mean, I don't see how they monetize this, maximize the money that they can make without making Ohio State and USC play. I mean, that'll be the marquee game of the conference. And I know they already have Ohio State. I think that has to happen. And so if that happens, Ohio State has the toughest slate, and it's not even close. It's just, I mean, never mind if they're going to keep with any of these out of conference, future schedules that they have, the home and homes, it's going to be abysmal to try to, win the Big Ten or make it to Indianapolis. And I think the only caveat is, with the expansion of the college football playoffs to 12 teams, they could sneak in with one or even maybe two losses if the schedule is that hard. I mean, can you imagine a schedule where they play Penn State, Michigan, USC, and Georgia, and a future with Alabama?
Dump Penn State, I guess.
That's the one that has become a pseudo rivalry that it's like, do you need it?
They'll play every other year.
Yeah.
So not a big deal there. David Greenshield, thank you so much for the contribution. Appreciate that. Zach, bigger Ohio State concern for the spring, offensive tackle or corner?
Well, I mean, I think it's just because of what they have behind the guys that left. One, you're replacing both starting tackles. Probably both are going to be first rounders. You're only replacing one corner, and I love Cameron Brown. I recruited him. He was a little underwhelming at times, so it's not like you're replacing Paris Johnson Jr. You're not replacing a top 15 pick. And on top of that, I really think Ohio State has some talent at young corner. They got to get developed. There might be a little baptism by fire, but I think they have some really qualified young kids that could fill that role opposite of Denzel Burke. At tackle, I don't know. I mean, they haven't really recruited the position great. Donovan Jackson can slide out to left tackle. I think he's talented enough to do that, but he's a true guard in the NFL, so that's not ideal. And then there's a bunch of question marks. I mean, a bunch of players that I'm not ready to say Zen Mikowski can be a great tackle. I haven't seen that yet. My biggest concern on offense, outside of is the quarterback that's going to start as good as the run of first rounders Ohio State's seen, is who's going to play tackle. I think that's the biggest concern on the team.
I see some chatter in the chat, which that's what it's there for, but they're talking about this Ohio State schedule, and they're making up a good point that how much pushback do you think Gene Smith and company would have against the Big Ten to say, we want to play big games too, but you can't do this to us, and you want us in the playoff too, right?
Well, that's the issue, right? Is do you kill your probably greatest opportunity to make the playoffs regularly? I know Michigan kind of has had a come up the last 2 years. USC's hot with Lincoln Riley, but Ohio State's been the consistent team that has at least been on the cusp of playoff berth every year. Do you want to hurt their chances of making the playoffs by giving them the toughest schedule? It doesn't seem like something that Ohio State would allow. And it'll be interesting to see with the new leadership of the Big Ten, how that relationship with Gene Smith kind of matriculates, because Gene Smith had a lot of pull with the Kevin Warren administration. I would imagine he still will, but it's one of those things where they're going to do what's best for the conference fiscally, financially. And hopefully they have the big picture in front of them that Ohio State making the playoffs is the best case scenario.
Zach Smith's here talking college football with us, so you can catch him every day. Menace to Sports right here on YouTube, 12 to 2 Eastern, 12 to 1 Eastern. And then you can catch his podcast, his audio podcast on all the major outlets. When we look at the landscape of college football and you bring up the playoff, there's all sorts of conjecture on what this 12-team expansion is going to do in terms of the powers that be, the elites, and if it's going to give the I don't want to say the little guy, the Penn State level, more opportunity. Well, that's obvious it does. Mm-hmm. But do you see this changing competitive nature, the parity?
It'll be interesting. I think that scheduling an out-of-conference game at this point, with these schedules that they're talking about, and the addition of Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC, and the addition of USC, UCLA to the Big Ten, I don't think you're going to see an out-of-conference game that's worth anything. I mean, I think it's going to truly go back to just a bunch of budget builders for the Bowling Greens and Toledos of the world, because you gain nothing. You don't need that big win to elevate yourself into the playoff conversation. The risk of losing to Oregon far outweighs the benefit of beating them when it comes to a 12-team playoff. If you're Ohio State, I think you're going to minimize those gains. So I think scheduling is going to be viewed a little differently, and I think that's going to be the biggest change. And I think you're going to see some times where you're in a Big Ten championship game, you're in the SEC championship game, and it doesn't really matter. Where in every other year, it's like, man, you better win that conference or else you might get knocked out. I mean, we obviously saw TCU lose and make it in, but for the most part, they valued that. Now they don't need to value that. I mean, the seeding might change, which is a big deal. Like being a champion and getting that bye is a huge benefit. But just when you talk about making the playoffs, it's not going to be as cutthroat to make it in. But I think what the trend will go is then people will see how valuable not playing that extra game against one of the top 12 teams in the country, how valuable that's going to be.
What we saw just this past season, even with a 4-team playoff, the SEC championship game didn't mean anything. The ACC, they were both knocked out. Michigan didn't need to win. Obviously, TCU was able to lose. So 4 of the 5 championship games meant nothing toward the playoff when it was all said and done. And that was a 4-team playoff.
Right. So it's really not going to matter when it's 12.
Got Zach Smith here, Menace to Sports on YouTube and on your favorite audio platform as well. Are you a big conference realignment guy? Do you dig into that? Do you think the Pac-12 is hanging by a thread? How do you put all that together?
I think there's going to be major changes over the next 5 years, and I don't know. I mean, the ACC is obviously the one conference that kind of has remained steady. They really didn't take any blows. They didn't lose any teams. And I think Notre Dame is the key player in all of this. I mean, if Notre Dame will ever join a conference, if it's the ACC becomes a third power conference. And if it's not, if it's the Big Ten I don't think they would go anywhere else, but I think that the ACC starts to diminish in value, and the Pac-12 and Big 12, I don't know what their plans are. I think they're on a lifeline right now fighting for survival, because you lose USC out of the Pac-12, you lose Texas and Oklahoma out of the Big 12. It truly becomes a tier between Group of 5 and Power 5. And I know they added Cincinnati, they added UCF, but it's just, we'll see. But then again, we saw TCU. They were a Group of 5 team not that long ago. and they just played in a national championship. So maybe a Cincinnati or a UCF really hits a growth and becomes a powerful program, and the Big 12 can survive. I think it's such flux and such limbo of all the different things that could happen. The Pac-12 is the one that I'm looking at like, boy, you guys are down and out. Like it's rough waters right now for the Pac-12.
Yeah, it seems like George Kliavkov made the move to say, I'm going to allow the rest of these conferences to negotiate their media rights, and I'm going to sit back, and then I can take advantage of what's left, where he probably should have moved first.
Yeah.
And now who knows where they're going to be relegated to playing their games, and people are going to be hunting all over the place to try to find them, or more or less not going to be hunting around to find them because they're going to be
Right.
satisfied with what they can watch on ESPN, CBS, and NBC.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If I'm the Big Ten and this whole grant of rights deal comes up, and you got the people with legal minds that say it's so airtight you can't get through it, and it doesn't matter even if you've got all the money in the world. You hear all sorts of stories, don't know what the exact reality of that situation is. But to really complete the national map for the Big Ten, and when I do the checklist for the Big Ten, the conference checks every box except for we don't have enough football players in the footprint outside of now Southern California. I go grab Miami and Florida State.
Absolutely. I think Miami's the one. I really think that Miami and Georgia Tech would be two great fits, both academically, capture Atlanta, capture South Florida. I think they could, and no problem with Florida State. I just don't know. The Big Ten is so dead set on this academic prowess. I don't know that they would ever allow it. I mean, we saw them. I mean, Texas and Oklahoma reached out to the Big Ten, and they basically blocked it and said, nah, we're an academic conference. And so I think they got to move south, and then they'll cover the country, coast to coast, east to west, north to south. I think Miami's a great fit, both academically. I mean, you get in South Florida. I mean, for the Buckeyes to travel to Miami, that'll be massive for recruiting, and there's a ton of Buckeyes in South Florida. I recruited there. There is a ton of Buckeye bars, watch parties. They're all over South Florida. And then I think my other one is Georgia Tech. I mean, Georgia Tech is a sleeping giant, and I know they have academic issues, but they're not that bad. I mean, they got kids in. Calvin Johnson played there. I mean, we just saw Jahmyr Gibbs was a freshman running back there. They can get great players in there. And I think Georgia Tech, you could capture Atlanta, get a presence in the state of Georgia, and they're a high academic institution. They just scream a perfect fit to me.
Yeah, people seem to forget if a program goes into a little bit of a slump, maybe makes a bad hire, Jeff Collins, then they forget that it's possible there. And I know Georgia Tech's never been a lead in our lifetime, but at the same time, Paul Johnson was churning out 8-4 teams on a regular basis going to ACC championship games. So It can be done there.
And they have the most millionaires of any college in America. Like, you can't tell me that they can't raise a little money and go get an Urban Meyer or go get a big name. Because if you brought a big name into Atlanta, the sky is the limit.
Yeah. Atlanta, I believe, is still the number one producer of NFL talent for a metro area. So it's there. No question about that. And back to the scheduling thing that I should have mentioned is I don't know that we're going to correct this whole scheduling mess with teams now not having any incentive, especially at the Ohio State level, to go get non-conference games. I don't think it's going to get fixed until you've got some kind of governing body that says we will do the schedule. Take it out of the school's hands and say, here's your schedule every year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what has to happen. And the beauty of it is, what did we learn during the COVID year? We don't need all this 7-year out scheduling. Like, just come out with the schedule in February, let the teams pick their hotels, book them, and go.
Yeah, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, they can all schedule more complicated schedules in an off season. But college football, we need like 9 years to do it.
Right.
All right, good stuff. We got Zach Smith on the line from Menace to Sports. Are you an NFL Combine guy?
I like watching it. I really liked it when I had, my players going to it, or at least kids I know, but there's still a couple that are out there, Cameron Brown being one. But I love the Combine just because these kids grow up. And even when they're playing, I mean, you have massive starters in college football, like Caleb Williams, for one. He's going to watch the Combine. A bunch of his teammates are going to be there, and he's just going to still be dreaming. He just won a Heisman. He's still dreaming of when it's his time to go to the Combine and be on TV, and everyone's talking about how good he is. Like, it's these kids' dreams. Now, The process is grueling. And I don't think people realize you're there for like 5 days. And the first 4 days are like 12-hour shifts of poking and prodding and interviews and meetings and all before you go out on the field. And it's like, all right, after that grueling process, let's see how fast you are. It's like, well, man, can I get a rest day? Like, I'm exhausted. So it's really cool to see the kids battle that adversity. And then, dreams are realized there. I mean, you watch a kid run a 4.27 and that kid done. He made millions of dollars in 4.27 seconds. It's just cool to watch.
So is there anything as a guy that was a coach for a long time, evaluate talent? Are there drills that you find more applicable than others?
I mean, I think the drill work, it all serves a purpose, right? We were talking about on my show today about just the throwing. Bryce Young's not going to throw, and what does that mean? And the throwing, expose that they do, it's intended to test like arm talent, not how great of a quarterback you are. It's to assess, like, can he make that throw? How accurate is he on that throw? Because you'll have a kid jump up that's a 4.4, then the next kid's a 4.8, then the next kid's a 4.3. It's like you've never thrown with these kids. There's no chemistry. A lot of the throws don't really even exist in the NFL, or they all exist, but they're not the most prevalent throws. And I watched highlights of Bryce Young just this morning. Some of the best things he does are evading pressure, extending plays, things that really matter. We see Patrick Mahomes do it all the time. Joe Burrow's a magician at it. That stuff doesn't get tested at the combine. So it's not like a true test into who's a good passing quarterback, because the position is so much deeper than wearing underwear and dropping back with no pass rush and dropping a go route 43 yards on the outside shoulder. That stuff matters, but it's truly testing like a small piece of the pie. So I like watching it, but it doesn't tell me much. How you're going to have Will Levis go out and make every throw in the book, and then you got to watch his film and say, okay, is this kid a legit franchise quarterback though? I know he can make throws, but there's a lot of guys. Cardale Jones was at Ohio State. He can make every throw on the football field, every one, but he wasn't a franchise quarterback.
To me, Zach, I'm a bit fascinated by, okay, you've got your scouting process between high school and college, and we see all the rankings from 247 rivals, etc. And sure, they miss it a lot. And I'm sure that even beyond their evaluation, that might actually be closer than we give them credit for. There's some politics that goes into those rankings. So you got that to deal with as well. And they're trying to rank 16 and 17-year-olds and project them 3 years later versus the NFL draft. For everything, all the resources and money that they put into that thing, but their ranking, and especially the competition level in high school, a kid could be a 5-star and he's playing 5-star, he's playing contemporaries on 1 week, and then half the schedule, he's playing a bunch of third graders by comparison. It's all over the place. Whereas if you're evaluating an NFL draft prospect, they're what kind of competition they're playing. I would just think it's a much more easier task, but they seem to miss it. If you look at the NFL first round, more than half the time.
Yeah, well, it's never failed. It's one of my favorite things that happens every year. It all comes down to ego, because NFL executives, NFL coaches, they have this ego about them that they know so much more than anyone else in the game. And so they go and evaluate a kid, and they don't listen to college coaches. If a kid is maybe, has all the physical tools, but just not a great player, they view that not as the kid might not be a great player, but, well, he had a bunch of college coaches, a bunch of slaps. They don't know what they're doing. Just wait. We're experts. We'll take this kid, Darius Hayward-Bay, that was a 4.2, and we're going to make him an NFL superstar because we are that good. We are that just phenomenal, better than anyone. And it happens every year. Every year. When I was at Ohio State, we had kids go in the first round. Like, did they ask anybody here if that kid could play? Like, he is not a first rounder at all. And then we had kids like Jordan Fuller, who's a great player, drops into like the 6th round, and he's a captain for the Rams. And you're like, did they ever call Greg Schiano? The kid was one of the best safeties we had. And it's like but he ran a 4.69 or what? I don't even know what he ran. But it really comes down to the conceited nature and the politics. You have, scouting and personnel departments versus coaches and GMs that make the call, and some head coaches make the call. And it's such a train wreck in the NFL. And that's why their miss rate is so high.
And just to bring it back to the college game, is it another reason why some college coaches don't make obvious moves that they should make? I'm talking about ego. So the same ego that elevated them to where they are, that was the driving force and all the confidence that they have, which is amazing. But in the case of, let's say, a Les Miles, you get a game management coach because the guy blows 2 games a year because he can't, put together a situation versus the clock and the down in distance. He just can't do that.
Yeah.
But he's not going to hire somebody to stand next to him for the last 3 minutes of the game to tell him, coach, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Jimbo
Right.
Fisher is going to ignore that he can't run an offense anymore, even though he's going to get all the credit in the world if they become SEC champions, whether he's got an offensive coordinator or not. So he finally goes out there and gets Bobby Petrino. I don't know how that's going to work out, or if you have any thoughts, but it's just amazes me that these coaches sometimes let the ego get in the way.
It is, and I think that's what makes the really great ones great. I mean, Nick Saban is not that way. Urban Meyer, one of his greatest faults, he was that way, but he was able to kind of recognize it, maybe a little too late, but that he had to bring in people that satisfied his deficiencies. And the hiring of Ryan Day as offensive coordinator and Kevin Wilson was the greatest example, where he finally said, you know what? He was like Jimbo Fisher. He said, I can't do it. Like, I've been a head coach for so long. The offensive game has passed me by. I'm going to give it up, and I'll just sit in here. I'll be a manager, but I'm going to let guys that actually know offensive football way better than I do run an offense. And I think that's hard for coaches to do, because especially you look at like you said, Les Miles or Jimbo Fisher. Like, Jimbo Fisher's come up was being a dominant offensive coordinator. And as you go on your head coach journey, you don't study the game as much. It passes you by a little bit, and there's some ego involved. Like, no, I'm that guy on offense. That's how I got here. And at some point, the really great coaches are able to say, all right, I'm not good at this anymore. Let me bring someone in who can do this at a better clip than I can.
Zach Smith, Menace to Sports. You can catch him every day on YouTube right here. Menace to Sports, just look it up. Noon to 1 Eastern, and then on your favorite audio platform as well. Zach, always appreciate the time and the expertise, man.
I appreciate it, Mark. Always fun.
Great stuff from Zach Smith, talking college football with us. I always appreciate that I can shout out to Zach, and he jumps on the line with us all the time to talk college football, and it's great to get his insight and perspective. Just want to remind everyone that we've got an Iowa Hawkeye show live at 5:30 Eastern. That's over on the Iowa channel. Keep in mind, everyone, we've got 25 team channels, and I got to tell you, about 10 of them, forget about for right now. We're really not working on those, but we got about 15 that are viable, so check them out and lock in on those particular channels if you enjoy the content there. So it's our Iowa live show at 5:30 Eastern. And then on the Nebraska channel, Huskers live at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, a little bit later this week, we've got our conversation, of course, with Steve Dace right here on the main channel. So catch the one with Steve Dace. That's every Thursday. We get it warmed up at 4:30 Eastern right here, the Voice of College Football with Steve Dace, Michigan podcast. I'm going over to talk to Steve right now and record the Michigan podcast here in just a few minutes. Also, our Discord. So basically, go to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV, and sign up right there, and you're automatically in our Discord. As soon as I get that link to you within a couple hours, bam, you're ready to roll and talk college football with our knuckleheads 24/7, 365. And yes, Joey, how about this merch? Let me drop the link here to our merchandise that you can check it out. Just give it a look and see what you think. If you have any suggestions, certainly let us know. But I have dropped the link to our new line of merchandise for the Voice of College Football. And again, got any suggestions for us, let us know. But otherwise, check it out. Joey has done a phenomenal job setting that up. So give it a look. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. We will see you in a few hours on Iowa Live at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. Appreciate you being here.